As we learned in the previous video, the moment you commit to achieving an impossible goal, your brain begins to oblige you, even though you think it's impossible. Actually, I should say that your brain begins to oblige you because you think it's impossible. You see, when you say that something is impossible for you, what you really mean is that you believe you're incapable of it. But when you commit to it anyway, when you commit to what you know you're incapable of, your brain thinks, okay, what got us here isn't going to get us there. So what will get us there? You already know that your current capabilities won't get you there, which is why you think it's impossible in the first place. So your brain knows you have to add some new capabilities, and it starts working on that immediately. You have to do things differently because what got you here can't get you there. Or as the legendary entrepreneurial coach Dan Sullivan likes to say, what got you out of Egypt won't get you to the promised land. When you commit to something that you know is impossible, your brain knows that you need to think differently and act differently than you have to this point in your life, because what got you here can't get you there. For example, if you think about increasing your revenue by 30% year over year, you know how to do that, right? You just have to do 30% more than you're doing now, or do it a little more efficiently, or maybe both. But if you commit to an impossible goal, like increasing your revenue by 1,000% in 3 years or less, your brain knows it has to throw all that other stuff out the window and start fresh, because you can't work 1,000% harder. You can't work 1,000% more efficiently. You have to do something different because what got you here won't get you there. So when you commit to an impossible goal, the first thing your brain does is to cut through all the noise and distractions of your daily activities and begin to focus on what you can actually do to help you achieve the impossible. Everything else gets discarded. It's like standing in front of a desk cluttered with all sorts of junk. When you commit to the impossible, your brain surveys all that junk, figures out what's worth keeping, and sweeps everything else into the trash can. Turns out there isn't much worth keeping, which is why an impossible goal is actually easier than a possible goal, because it means you do less work, not more. It comes down to what psychologists call constraint theory. Simply put, this means that human beings are never stronger than their weakest link. Whatever we do, from assembly lines to managing companies to exploring outer space, even exploring our own inner space, we can never be stronger than our weakest link. Sounds logical enough, but here's where it gets interesting. When it comes to your own inner space, your thinking, your weakest link is your attention. We live in an age of such unprecedented distractions that the rarest and most precious commodity on earth is our attention. Your attention is your most valuable property. It's even more valuable than your time, because what you choose to pay attention to determines what you do with your time and what you accomplish with your time. In an interconnected world of billions of people, sometimes it can feel as if all of them are trying to distract our attention at the same time. Not to mention that we're also pretty damn good at distracting ourselves. The result is that our attention often fails to focus on what matters to us most. In the privacy of our own thoughts, we fritter away our invaluable attention on a million little things instead of focusing on the big things that make a real difference in our lives. Buffeted continuously in a storm of cognitive noise, we too often allow ourselves to major in minor things. Like the kinds of goals we set, for example. When you focus on small goals, your attention gets lost on small details. But when you focus on large goals, on impossible goals, then you get to focus your attention on only the most important details. For instance, suppose you were to set a goal to grow your business by 30% in the next year. I know we keep coming back to this, but revenue's an easy way to play this out. Imagine how many ways there are to grow a business by 30%. How many different things you can do to accomplish this. You could hire more salespeople or better salespeople, or improve the salespeople you have. You could tweak your marketing so that you're reaching people you wouldn't normally reach, or messaging people more effective. You could consider outreach on social media if you haven't been there yet, or print media if you haven't done that, or TV advertising if you haven't tried that, or any of the other media that you haven't tried. Or you could simply do a better job with the media you already use. Or you could find a way to persuade your existing customers to purchase more. When you think about it, the list of what you could do to increase your revenue by 30% is all but endless, and that's the problem. How do you know where to begin? How do you know which is the best strategy to follow? There are so many options to consider that you can't possibly know enough about all of them to reasonably choose any of them. In engineering terms, there's no way to separate the signal from the noise. Meanwhile, your invaluable attention is wasted because it's spread too thin. At this level of thinking, you can't help but get lost in the weeds because the weeds are all you have. There are simply too many possibilities to consider each one fully enough to make an informed choice about how to proceed. So you waste a bunch of time with consultants, analysis, research, committees, meetings, and in the end, you roll the dice. You choose a couple of things to work on and hope to God you're right. Unfortunately, after all this paralyzing analysis, the mathematical odds say that you'll make the wrong choices. We all know the famous Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule. This tells us that we typically produce 80% of our results from only 20% of our activities. So 80% of our day is swallowed up by the tasks that do us the least good. They're essentially a waste of time. Although the percentages may vary, this rule seems to apply to a great many human activities, like deciding how we spend our time. When we have to choose between a multitude of options, we don't have enough time to properly evaluate. The one thing we do know is that 80% of them are likely to do us very little good. Statistically, we're going to make the wrong choices 80% of the time. Meanwhile, what gets lost in all this cognitive noise is the staggering cost of making the wrong choices. We can illustrate this with a simple dollars and cents scenario. Imagine that your typical workday is 10 hours, during which your activities typically generate $1,000 in profit. The 80-20 rule suggests that you'll spend about 80% of your time, or 8 hours, on activities that generate about 20% of your profit, or $200. You do the math, and it comes out to $25 an hour. The 80-20 rule also suggests that you'll spend about 20% of your time, or 2 hours, on activities that generate about 80% of your profit, or $800. This works out to $400 an hour. This is a 16 times greater return on your investment than you get from doing the 80% activities. That's 1,600% better. Man, I wish my stock portfolio would look like that a year from now. Putting it bluntly, when you invest time in 80% activities, then you're choosing to obtain a 1,600% lower return on your investment. When I first did the math on this for my own business, it felt like it'd been punched to the gut. Obviously, I wasn't intentionally choosing to make such lousy investment decisions with my time and my resources, but there it was, in black and white. And with it came one of the most important questions I've ever asked myself. How can I know in advance which activities are the 80% and which are the 20%? And this is where committing to an impossible goal makes all the difference in the world. We'll dig a lot deeper into this in the next video that you can link to right here. See you there.